This week there's behind-the-scenes access to the sometimes disconcerting working methods of the late great Irish playwright Samuel Beckett, who was born 100 years ago. His plays such as Waiting for Godot and Endgame had a profound impact on theatre. And the actor Stephen Reay, who himself worked with Beckett, explores their innovations from an actor's perspective.
I'm standing on the stage of the Peacock Theatre in Dublin. This basement playhouse shares the same building as the more famous Abbey Theatre and is situated on the north bank of the River Liffey. For it was here in the Peacock, clad in a fake long white beard and carrying an alarm clock, that a young lecturer named Samuel Beckett delivered his only words as an actor. Deciding his talents lay elsewhere, Beckett devoted himself to writing for the rest of his life, providing generations of actors with some of the most challenging and rewarding roles in modern drama. Standing on stage, rehearsing your part, the awareness that in the dark, silent studio, Beckett's eyes and ears were trained on each word, each movement of your performance, was a defining experience.
I saw a man walking into the room wearing one of those sort of raincoats and hair that looked as though it had been cut with a knife and fork. It just seemed to stand straight up in the air. Very pale, pale blue eyes. And a man who was very quiet and sitting in the corner and said nothing. But I felt he was absorbing everything.
Charming spot. Inspiring prospects. Let's go.
We can't.
Why not?
We're waiting for Godot.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine the furore which greeted early performances of Waiting for Godot. During Lucky's extended monologue, audience members walked out of the theatre or banged on the stage in anger and confusion.
Given the existence as uttered forth in the public works of Punker and Votman of a personal god, quay, 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 with white beard, quay, 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 outside time, without extension...
Even today, Beckett's drama is perceived as difficult. Beckett's work is frequently cited as an example of the theatre of the absurd, a title which isn't entirely positive. Beckett's plays are undoubtedly complex, using material from esoteric sources in literature, history, philosophy and music. Yet many are also tremendously funny, drawing on the comic traditions of the music hall and vaudeville. But he was also for most of his life a working man of the theatre, writing, directing, overseeing numerous productions of his plays. He often said that his plays weren't fully created until they'd been performed. As such, he, more than almost any other modern playwright, influenced the work of the actors and directors who brought his texts to the stage.
Don't you laugh at it still, every time I tell it? Happy.
I was playing Nag, who basically spends an hour and a half in a barrel.
Lawrence Held was directed by Samuel Beckett in a Berlin production of Endgame during the late 70s.
Beckett had entered the church during the early run of the play. We're just running it through ourselves. So I came popping out of the barrel to find him sitting in the middle of the auditorium.
Let me tell it again.
Very still, listening very hard, and I just spent the next 15 minutes hurling the Taylor's speech at him.
In 6 days, do you hear me? 6 days, God made the world. Yes, sir, no less, sir. The world! And you are not bloody well capable of making me a pair of trousers in 3 months!
At the end, he got up and started work on the play, and while he was directing, the tone of the play became a lot drier and more direct, and therefore funnier.
My dear sir, my dear sir, look at the world. And look at my trousers.
Endgame was Beckett's own favourite play. It was also my first professional experience of his work. Beckett was heavily involved in this production, which was directed by Donald McQuinney. Sam was much more meticulous in the process of transforming text to performance than any other director I worked with. Many directors treat the text as a starting point. With Beckett, this wasn't an option.
Hold him tight. Don't let him go. Hold him tight.
when he arrived, he said he wanted to put order to this play. He said the play was written in a disorderly way, which was very amazing because everybody who knows the play or reads the play thinks it has a very precise shape.
The German director Walter Asmus, who became Beckett's trusted friend and confidant, first worked with him in 1975 on Waiting for Godot at the Schiller Theatre in Berlin.
His precision and his way of directing the play in music terms. He didn't direct it, he conducted the play. That impressed me very much. And the way of finding truth, being capable to divide between actors overacting and truthful behavior of an actor on the stage, that was very, very impressive.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen. And let me wish you, what have I done with my watch?
The Schiller Godot provides an ideal example of the attention to detail which Beckett brought to performances of his own plays. He spent over a year preparing himself, learning the entire German text by heart. Even when he wasn't personally involved, actors and directors acknowledged Beckett's intentions. He started to direct productions of his own work in the 60s and kept detailed personal notebooks.
His Grace
Interruption 1.
and Most Reverend Father in God,
Hat halfway to head.
Dr. Carolus Hunter.
Interruption 2.
Opening for smart.
Hat 3/4 way to head. Interruption 3.
My first ball.
Almost there.
My second ball.
He was ensuring that actors and directors would be well informed of his developing vision. Irish actor Barry McGovern knew Beckett and acted in many of his plays.
In any given production, you're going to have different actors, different director, different set designer, but once they stay within what Beckett wants, which is surely the purpose of doing a play, is you want to serve the author. It's not about serving yourself. I mean, he cut things, he changed things. He was a working man of the theatre. If a thing didn't work, he changed it.
But he could be hurt or disappointed when others changed things in ways he didn't approve of. In 1984, for instance, he tried and failed to block an American production of Endgame, which was due to be staged in a subway. A network of trusted colleagues kept him informed of productions around the world. The Irish actor David Kelly performed in the first Dublin production of Krapp's Last Tape in 1959. Beckett did not attend, but after his death, Kelly discovered that the play had not gone unnoticed.
His nephew and Barney Russell, his publisher, said to me, "Don't worry about that." He said, "Sam knew everything that was going on in Dublin. If a bike got stolen in Phibsborough, Sam would know about it because the spies were everywhere." He said, "Believe me, he knew about your production."
Krapp's Last Tape is a one-man show in which the ailing Krapp listens to tapes of himself as a younger man. This was Beckett's recreation of the environment of his final years in Dublin in the 1930s. When a struggling writer, he wrote in a garret above his father's offices here at 6 Clare Street, just behind Trinity College. It's a tall Georgian building, sash windows, towering chimney stack.
17 copies sold, 11 of which at trade price to free circulating libraries beyond the seas. Getting known? £1.06 and something. 8, I have no doubt. You know, it is there on the page, and the directions are awfully good, really, and terribly helpful. You know, they're not like commandments, but they're actually a gift to the actor.
Each second is acutely imagined. An American director of his work once remarked that Beckett left him little to do. He once wrote that he couldn't tolerate the omnipresent massacre and abuse of directorial function. And he began to direct his own plays to ensure that they would be performed and staged as he wanted. Lawrence Held,
When we were doing the rehearsals for Endgame, I was fairly recently out of drama school, and I didn't realise that Beckett didn't much like talking about his plays, and there was a moment at lunch where the four of us were sitting across one side having some sandwiches, and I looked across the room and he was sitting on the other side having a cup of tea or something like that, and I sat down next to him and said, "Sam, what is Endgame about?" And he looked extremely pained for a moment. And then he kind of thought and looked at me and said, "Well, I should preface this by saying at this time the grand final chess championship between Karpov and Korchnoi was taking place somewhere in the world. And Beckett used to go back to his atelier at the Académie de Künste every night after rehearsals and replay that day's match, as he found it in the newspaper. So he says, like the last game between Karpov and Korchnoi. After the third move, both knew that neither could win, but they kept on playing." So I got my answer. I never asked him again.
I love the old questions. Ah, the old questions, the old answers. There's nothing like them.
Actors in Beckett's plays have to come to terms with the fact that his plays are not about experiences as such, but are the experiences themselves. The key to Beckett's drama is ambiguity. He never discussed any possible social or psychological context, even if, as in Waiting for Godot, certain aspects of the play would seem to demand it.
So you were waiting for him?
Well, you see...
Here? On my land?
Oh, we didn't intend any harm. We meant well.
The road is free to all.
Well, that's how we looked at it.
It's a disgrace, but there you are.
Nothing we can do about it?
Let's say no more about it.
Sam was about stand there, no, not there, 2 feet further over. Lift that line. Speak in your higher register. Put that line from your chest voice. He always reduced everything to technical things because he didn't want to say, "This is what it means."
Closer! Stop! Yes, the road seems long when one journeys all alone for
He sensed, and I think he's right, that if you tell an actor, you're representing the Anglo-Irish landowners when you play Pozzo, you're giving him a whole load of baggage which he may not be able to cope with and which may not help the audience at all.
In a word, the dead loss per caput since the death of Bishop Berkeley being to the tune of 1 inch 4 ounce per caput approximately, by and large, more or less, to the nearest decimal good measure, round figures, stark naked in the stockinged feet in Connemara. In a word, for reasons unknown...
Peter Hall worked with Samuel Beckett on many occasions and directed the first and famous English-language production of Waiting for Godot in London in 1955 at the age of only 24.
I didn't meet Sam until... after we'd opened. He wouldn't come over and he wouldn't come to rehearsals. But he wrote me about 20 wonderful letters about the play, not saying what it meant. If you said, "What does this mean?" he'd say, "What does it say?" Beckett's world was something very different.
Different and disorientating for some actors. In work by other dramatists, you often find motivation in imagining the life of your character off stage. Working with Beckett was not the same. It was more like performance art.
Basically, the actors existed only on the stage, and it's something quite strange for an actor to realise that once he leaves the stage that he ceases to exist altogether as a character in a Beckett play.
I am Pozzo. Does that name mean nothing to you? I say, does that name mean nothing to you?
Pozzo. Pozzo.
Pozzo. Pozzo.
Pozzo!
Many actors were not ready to deal with Beckett's radical approach. One who mastered the art was Billie Whitelaw, Beckett's leading lady of choice for many years. He wrote Footfalls especially for her, and she was buried up to her neck as Winnie in Happy Days.
About 50, well preserved, blonde for preference, plump, arms and shoulders bare, low bodice, big bosom, pearl necklace. She is discovered sleeping, her arms on the ground before her, her head on her arms. Beside her on the
We'd been rehearsing a few days, and I said, "How were you able to write the story of my life before you knew me. How could you do this? As happy days as me. I'm in a hole, trying to get out, trying to make sense of things. Aren't we all?
Charlie Hunter. I close my eyes, and I'm sitting on his knees again. In the back garden at Borough Green, under the horse beech. Oh, the happy memories.
Billie Whitelaw was like a medium when she worked with Samuel Beckett.
I don't say I understood intellectually what Beckett meant when he wrote, but I certainly did emotionally. I understood from my gut.
There's a famous photograph by John Haynes where she is crouched together on the ramp of the stage, Beckett standing in front of her, giving her line readings.
3 seconds.
And doing all the light fades in rhythm and
Louder.
the light
2 seconds.
coming up in rhythm and
Gazes
the chime
front.
of the bell
3
and the rhythm of the echo of the chimes.
Smile.
And that told me
Smile off.
more than him sitting down and explaining what the play was about.
Eyes to zenith.
She had understood the emotional qualities and all the implications and was capable to express them through her own feelings, through her own body.
I had to repeat it over and over and over and over again. In the bath, out of the bath. It was never out of my thoughts. I had a tape in my pocket and earphones on, and wherever I went, if I couldn't actually say it out loud, I had it in my ears, even when I was having conversations with other people. If I kept on going over it and looking at it and tapping out the rhythms, something started to grow inside me.
That was, for Samuel Beckett, the ideal way of working with actors, and if they filled it with emotions to a certain extent, you could see him beam. He was absolutely captured then when these emotions were true and honest.
Oh, I see. You still have some of that stuff left. Work it well in, dear. And now the other. Oh, this is going to be another happy day.
If he paid little attention to psychological motivation, then he concentrated minutely on other aspects of performance. On the crucial aspect of line delivery, he had a number of techniques to admit you to his world. He provided imagistic, enigmatic direction, urging you to use your voice as a kind of canvas.
At the end of one session of the rehearsals of Godot at the Riverside Studios in London, he approached the American actor playing Vladimir and myself and talked about the end of the first act when the moon rises. And he said, oh, very good. He said, but what I'd like you to do next time is to talk with the tone of moonlight in your voices.
At last. What are you doing?
Pale for weariness.
Eh?
Of climbing heaven and gazing on the likes of us.
Your boots. What are you doing with your boots?
And of course, we understood exactly what he meant.
I always think Sam paints. He doesn't just write words. He writes music with his words, and he paints with the movement. I always felt like a walking, talking Edvard Munch painting.
Oh, to be in atoms, in atoms.
Sometimes he used art as an inspiration, and sometimes music. In Paris, he sought the advice of Stravinsky in order to create a new, more exact way of notating silence.
He loved listening to music, he loved listening to records, he went to concerts regularly. He was absolutely steeped in music, and that means steeped in detailed, different interpretations of the same pieces. Dominant interest for him, a passion.
He was a fine pianist himself, and Walter Asmus recalls an occasion when he ordered a piano to be brought into the rehearsal studio.
to find the right levels of the voice qualities of the three actors on stage. And he conducted it, and when I lift up my fist, then you get louder. And when I take it down, you speak lower.
He subsides. Indeed, all subsides. A great calm descends. Listen. Pan sleeps.
Will night never come?
It was very exciting. He was standing in the background during rehearsals and give them the tone on the piano, and then the actors tried to keep that. It was a good laugh for the actors too.
Loss of spirits, lack of keenness, want of appetite, infants, children, adults. 6 level tablespoonfuls daily.
Sometimes the physical demands of Beckett's plays can push actors to the limit. I can remember coming off stage, my legs shaking, my body stiff, after spending half an hour stock still in Beckett's A Piece of Monologue.
Dwells thus as if unable to move again, or no will left to move again, not enough will left to move again. Turns in the end and gropes to where he knows the lamp is standing.
His demands are really quite something. In play we had a mixture of porridge, surgical glue, and we used to put that on our faces every night. And the first sort of few days we had lovely, lovely clear skin, and then we all had raging acne. In Not I, not being able to move my head, we finally had to clamp my head, either side of my head, clamp it and tie it to the chair, because my head started to shake, and therefore my mouth was going in and out of the light.
Beckett once wrote that he turned to drama because of the need to create for a smaller space, one in which I had some control over where people stood or moved. He was a kind of choreographer, Walter Asmus.
Balletic. Everything should be balletic. One of the principles was to make a step, a physical step, let us say, and then to speak. And then go on, make another step, and then the second half of the sentence, and so on. It was all choreographed.
You wanted to speak to me?
Silence. Estragon takes a step forward.
You had something to say to me?
Another step forward.
Didi.
Without turning.
I've nothing to say to you.
You're angry?
Silence. Step forward.
Forgive me.
Step forward. Estragon
Didi.
lays his hand on Vladimir's shoulder.
Give me your hand.
Beckett was meticulous in what he wanted, but you had huge latitude in making decisions about how to perform. It's not really a case of his approach changing substantially with age. Those who worked with Beckett late in his life found a similar balance between instruction and inspiration. Everett Frost.
One wants to sit down with a guy who was smarter than I am and try to understand and listen and feel your way through to what it was he thought it was that you ought to get out of that play. He was also extremely generous, as helpful as he could be, but would always end a conversation by saying, look, in the end, anything you want, do anything you want. And of course, that in some ways was the most restricted, because you now had the liberty to try to do the thing and guess the thing that would be good for him.
I use none but the simplest words, I hope, yet I sometimes find my way of speaking very bizarre.
Samuel Beckett challenged his actors, sometimes in extreme ways. Alongside these challenges, I remember his great vision and his great kindness. Despite his rather forbidding public image, he inspired tremendous affection and loyalty in those who knew him.
He never said to me at the end of any rehearsal, oh, yes, Billy, that was very good. Oh, yes, I like that, Billy. Oh, you're getting better. Oh, that's lovely. Nothing. He said absolutely nothing. Faster, slower, blah, blah. But at the end of the film of Not I suddenly heard him whisper, miraculous. I've never forgotten that, and I can still hear his sound in my head.
At the heart of Samuel Beckett's legacy lie these relationships and these memories. He inspired his actors and his colleagues to see theatre and performance in a radically different way. They passed his ideas and his methods on to others, like the students who now read and play his work at the Samuel Beckett Centre for Drama here at Trinity College in Dublin. Many of his dramatic characters live in bleak confusion, yet his work is somehow a celebration of existence. Its impact has been immense. Beckett is the beginning of modern drama. The human imagination will never be the same again.
It's not certain.
No. Nothing is certain.
We can still part if you think it would be better.
It's not worthwhile now.
No. It's not worthwhile now.
Well, shall we go?
Yes. Let's go.
They do not move.
The closing lines of Samuel Beckett's play Waiting for Godot, ending this week's Close-Up. The presenter was Stephen Reay and the producer Melvin Rickaby.